Hi, I'm Fred Schultz, and I'm running for president. You might not have heard of me, but I'm running for president. You don't have to be in some major party to win. Any citizen can run who's 35 or older. I'm 48. I'm a lawyer. I'm a historian. I'm an artist. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a singer. Human rights activist. And I'm an abolitionist. I'm fighting to free 2 million people in our jails wrongfully in our jails, enslaved in our jails, for victimless and consensual crimes. Unconstitutional victimless and consensual crimes. Our nation was founded for one reason: freedom. It's the first few lines of the Constitution. Freedom. It's the whole reason that people, revolutionaries, laid down their lives. Freedom. Well, now America has gone from being the land of the free, the land of the enslaved, land of the killed, in jail. And I've had enough of this. You do not have to be of some major party to win. George Washington, in his farewell address, was very against any concepts of parties, certainly any reliance of parties. He knew that it would divide our nation. All it does is it makes people go into these silly groups. One party has one set of ideas, another has another, and it causes this polarization. Well, I, like most Americans, and like our founding mothers and fathers of our nation, deeply believe that the government has no right to lock us up, to keep us in jail as slaves, where we're often raped, beaten, often beaten to death in jails, tortured, often dying in jails. You know, about 4,000 people die in jail every year. You have 700 people who are killed during arrest every year. Yes, we have 10,000 people on the streets dying by guns every year, but the majority of those people, and about maybe 12,000 total murders, the majority of those people killed, the cause is simple: drug prohibition. Drug prohibition is the number one cause of this crime. Cause of this murder. It's the cause. When drugs are made illegal, it boosts the price. When the price is boosted, then it makes it something that's attractive for people to go into selling when they have no money. Now, so that also comes to the question, and then of course that causes all this crime, murder, and then you have the police going against the citizens. Well, I'll tell you this. Now in this country, did you know that we have 15 million people arrested a year? By far, we have the highest arrest rate, incarceration rates of the world, by far. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. In other words, we have 5 times the rate of 500% more people in jail than your average nation. Now, we have also been launching all these overseas wars, and it's ridiculous. Yes, we were attacked on 9/11 horribly. Some evil murderers hijacked some planes and took them into buildings and, into farmland for those who had a revolt on the plane. But I'll tell you this. The proper way to react to that was not by launching wars in Afghanistan, wars then in Iraq. No. 16 of the 20 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. I don't believe any of them were from Afghanistan. Yes, they had some training camps, maybe just one training camp there, probably a square acre. Now, what I advocated at the time was to go after that the people who had done the murders. That doesn't mean you have to take over a whole country. Now, this wrongful reaction to this overreaction by conquering Afghanistan, by conquering Iraq, has led now to a major Muslim civil war. And now we have not won these wars. Before I go on, let me just say, yes, I understand that Hillary is better than Trump, better than Donald. Whoop-de-doo. Yes, she's way better. Whoop-de-doo. She's still supported all these years, all these victimless crimes. Now she says she's against mass incarceration. Well, she supported all these victimless crimes. She supported locking people up for these victimless crimes. That's 15 million people arrested a year in our country. About how many caused by victimless crimes? Probably 10, 12, 13, 14. Maybe 1 million are for real crimes. But then the other thing that this leads to is, obviously, is you're focusing so many arrests on people who haven't hurt anyone that you don't have enough money or jail space or police time to focus on people who have hurt people. So, in other words, we have approximately 500,000 rape kits. That's the test. That's the DNA samples they take when somebody's raped. Untested in this country. About 85% of the rape kits go untested in this country. In other words, approximately 85% of all crimes with victims. I mean, rape is the most horrible crime. So, in other words, about 85% of all crimes with victims go unpunished. Now, keep in mind also, drug prohibition is the major cause of all this robbery in our nation, the cause of most shootings on the streets. You don't blame the guns, no. I mean, we need guns to defend ourselves, sadly. Especially against the terrorists, or against just maniac mass murderers who get their hands on assault weapons, which I certainly believe that these machine guns should be banned. But I also think that everybody should be carrying a small gun on them. Why? It's common sense. We're in danger if you don't have one. And it's not just against other people with guns. Somebody can attack you with a knife. Somebody can pull their jujitsu moves on you, whatever. It's a gun is the best protection against maniacs out there. It's sad, but it's true, and we should all be allowed to carry one everywhere, not like in this city that I'm living in now, or like in New York where I lived in the past, where it's almost impossible to get one, at least in New York, unless you bribe somebody. I think the going rate was $15,000 recently. But that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Now, of course, also, drug prohibition is the major cause of the massacres going on south of our border. Oh, so the whole thing, the, quote, Mexicans, it's also people from Guatemala, El Salvador. Now, Obama's policy, which he's recently instituted, of turning people back at the border of Mexico to go back into Guatemala, that's not, and Nicaragua, and, that's not right either. I mean, these people are refugees of the USA-created and sponsored drug war. Yes, we used to send helicopters into these villages, strafing the jungles and the farms and poisoning their crops, and then we wonder, and then we create these major, the U.S. has a death rate. Well, we have maybe about 12,000 people dying per year on our streets. I think Mexico has 20,000, and these other nations have far higher death rates than the U.S. Mexico's is about 4 times higher. Guatemala's is about 20 times higher, the death rate. So we have turned these nations literally into killing fields, both through our drug war and through our lack of doing, economic development, which is what we would be doing. Now, the third centerpiece of my campaign, so I want to end these victimless crimes, free everybody in jail for them, and pardon everyone in jail for them. So that means stopping the wrongful arrest of about 12, 13, 14 million people a year and refocusing our efforts on arresting only people who have done crimes. I want most of the police to be out there guarding us against terrorists and, of course, focusing on finding people who have done real crimes, like rapists. Now, I want to free all these people wrongfully in jail. It's about 2 million any given moment, but I want to also stop these 15 million arrests. But also I want to pardon about 70 million people. And that 70 million number is important because about 70 million people, therefore, have had their lives ruined. Now, about 7 million of them cannot vote again ever. They've had their voting rights stolen. Even though in the Constitution they have a right to vote, yeah, well, you do a crime, some judge says you can never vote again. 7 million people, 7 million people, it's hard to get these numbers straight. They try to hide them. 7 million people can't vote right now, and I will let them vote. Now, we also have people who have extremely long sentences for extremely minor crimes. I will reduce those sentences. Then you also have people who are wrongfully convicted, and we don't know how many. I want to end the death penalty, both because it's wrong. You can't say, oh, well, killing is wrong, so to punish you for killing, we're going to kill. But it's also the issue that, how can I put this? We make mistakes. I'm not involved. I've been fighting against this for decades, but I've been fighting against these victimless crimes, these unconstitutional victimless crimes for 30 years. It's my third time running for president. I ran in 2004 and in 2012. I thought that Obama would be better in 2008. He's pardoned maybe a few hundred people now. I would pardon about 70 million. Big difference. Now, these 70 million people, they can never work again. So how can a nation be productive? How can a nation be successful when you have 70 million people with criminal records, when you're fighting all these overseas wars? We've sent actually 2.5 million soldiers overseas to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are our best young women and men who I want to bring them all back home to guard us here. Everyone. They talk about ISIS. Look. For centuries, there has been a roiling civil war over in the Middle East between the Sunni and the Shia Muslims. That's just how it is. And for centuries, if a Westerner went over there, it was likely that if you didn't convert, you would be killed. That's just how it was. Now, the problem with what Hillary and Donald want to do over there is they want to go over there and, quote, crush ISIS. Bomb. Well, we've been bombing the shit out of them for 15 years. We have probably killed about 1 million people in Iraq, but we are no safer now than when we started this bombing, and that whole war was a mistake. But similarly, the war in Afghanistan was a mistake. The Taliban now rules at least half of that nation. And, by the way, the Taliban was not the ones who did 9/11. Oh, I was getting to that. They were friends. His name is Sheikh Omar, was this blind sheikh. He was friends with bin Laden. But he didn't know about the plan to do 9/11. He wasn't in on it. These people in these madrasas, in their religious schools weren't, had nothing against us. Let's put it that way. They might have wanted to rule their nation and had started to take over, Afghanistan. And they probably would have, taken over Pakistan or a lot of it. But you have to understand, these people ruling Pakistan are very close with the Taliban. It's hard to say they're any different. They're, the same group, pretty much. So, when you're worried about Muslim radicals having a nuclear bomb, well, they already do. It's called Pakistan. Uh, you forget this. And no, Trump goes on talking about, I'm sorry, but how he goes on saying how, Iran, he would not have cut this nuclear deal with Iran, and then he starts screaming about ISIS. So he wants to if he hadn't, if we hadn't cut this deal with Iran to take away their nuclear weapons, then they would have continued developing their nuclear weapons. If they would have continued developing their nuclear weapons, then we would have had to attack them. So it looks like if Trump is president, he wants to be both fighting the Sunnis and the Shia. I do pray for peace, but I'll tell you this. The leader of Iran, Khomeini, whatever, just the other day, Ayatollah Khomeini, declared that the Saudis, because some people had been trampled, I think in a mass trampling there a few months ago, he declared that they are unfit to be ruling the Muslim holy sites just yesterday or the day before. So the way I see this is, look, I do pray for peace, but it looks like the Sunni and the Shia are going to be fighting this out a lot. Now, and then keep in mind the U.S. has been boosting the Saudis with our best weapons for the last several decades. I'm sure they have tens of billions of dollars, maybe over $100 billion of our best weapons by now. So you have the Saudi royal family who wants to take on ISIS. You have the Saudis who might be taking on the Iranians. The Iranians might be taking on the Saudis, and the Iranians are very close with the Iraqi government that we helped to install. So you have them together against ISIS. You have the Saudi royal family going against ISIS. The Iranians and the Iraqis all going against ISIS. I don't think we have to be too involved with going against ISIS. They're already lost half their ground, and they're probably going to lose the rest. Now, that said, the head of the FBI the other day, James Comey, did warn us, had a stark warning that if ISIS is crushed, if by us or anyone else, that we will have the biggest diaspora of terrorists fleeing there. And they'll probably mostly be going into Western Europe, but many of them will make it to the United States, he said. So really, it's not in our national interest to be going after them at all. It's in our national interest to be kind of hoping for some kind of a stalemate, just like the Iran-Iraq war was a stalemate, which killed almost 1 million people. Maybe 2 million, when it's hard to know when nobody's counting. We've killed at least 1 million people, or led to the deaths of at least 1 million people in Iraq. We don't know how many in Afghanistan. And of course, we've lost about 7,000 troops so far, not to mention of the 2.5 million troops that went and fought and came home, many having done several tours overseas. Yes, we've had tens of thousands coming back, about 40,000, I believe, injured. But, the PTSD and post-traumatic stress disorder and the traumatic brain injuries, we could have up to 500,000. Sorry, I'm wrong. Total number of wounded is about 700,000. Yes, that's the latest figure I saw. About 700,000, including traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and other physical wounds. Yeah, about 700,000. So we're talking huge numbers. Now, and then today they were talking about suicide. Yes, there's about 22 military people commit suicide a day, but those who have been in the Iran-Iraq war, it's maybe 7 a day. Now, look, that's 22 too many, that's 7 too many, but overall the number totals about 8,000 a year, and we have about, in the military killing themselves, veterans, and we have about 40,000 Americans total every year killing themselves. Now, and let's get back to the whole gun thing. So you have 10,000 people dying of gun murders and then 20,000 more dying of suicides a year. So look, yes, obviously we have to get our hands around, I mean, that doesn't sound right, but have to stop suicide as much as possible. But then we also have to remember, and look, we do have this, what we call a drug crisis in our country, but we're forgetting. A lot of people forget. Here, let me show you my sign for a minute. Free the 2 million. That's the 2 million in jail every second wrongfully for victimless and consensual crimes. And then here on the other side it says, no victim, no crime. Fred for Prez. That's me, Fred Schultz, JD. Yes, I'm a lawyer. And I'll tell you in a few minutes about the case I won, which I did once win a tax case that helped to return many billions of dollars back to the people who had lost it due to the federal government hurting them. Anyway, which brings me to, before I get to my tax plan is wonderful, but basically it's focused on taxing the net worth of the very wealthiest Americans, the 1% wealthiest, who have 45% of our nation's wealth. And the top 10% have, by the way, about 70% of our nation's wealth. That's where we have to get the money. Now, they all say, we have no money. We have a lot of money. This nation is worth about, it's hard to know, at least, at least $150 trillion, but maybe 250, maybe much more. I intend to tax, I'll just tell you my tax plan briefly, then we'll get back to the whole drug thing. There's so much to cover here. Oh. Now, the tax plan briefly, and I'm willing to make adjustments if I speak to Paul Krugman, who I want to be running the Federal Reserve or the Treasury Department or both, but whichever he wants. And then he can help recommend, because I trust him so much. He's a Nobel laureate. He's right about everything. By the way, his plan was not to bail out these banks, but to recapitalize them, meaning they go under, the government takes them over, and then relaunches them. And we could have done a lot more to help people who lost their homes. But I'll tell you this. At this point, what I want to do is tax the wealthiest Americans. The numbers I came up with is 4% of net worth over $6 million. And so, in other words, you keep your first $6 million that you earn free and clear. So it's like an accentuated property tax. That's also 4% over $6 million, 6% over $100 million, and maybe even 8% over $1 billion for people, corporations, and nonprofits combined. All the same. Now, that's the plan. That is the plan. That's what I'd like to do. Now, you could say, oh my God, isn't that high? Look, if we can get away with doing these numbers lower, I'd like to. I mean, if after crunching these numbers, we realize that we could have, 2% of tax over 6 million, 4% over 100 million, and, 5% over $1 billion, great. If that'll bring in enough money, great. I mean, if we realize, on the other hand, that we have to start taxing, say, 1 or 2% of net worth over $1 million, well, maybe we'll have to do that. But I want to try to avoid these kind of things. I really do. I want to tax as little as possible. And then as far as income tax goes, I do believe that we should be, making it easier for people to have families. So I want to limit the income tax to people who only can afford to pay it. In other words, it's hard to have a family and pay taxes. So I'd like to make it so that anybody earning up to $80,000, which is about 85% of the nation, 87% would pay no taxes. And then those earning over $80,000 would pay 10% of income and tax a year. Now, if we have to lower that number down to, say, $50,000 even, I'd be willing to do that if we had to balance all the numbers. I don't want to be unreasonable here, but I do want to have not just a decent safety net, but, a setup where we can, a government that helps to bring out the best in all of us. Now, you can say, who the hell are you to say, look, We were put on this earth for one reason alone. And that is to, yes, to survive, but to make the world a better place for every person, for every, animal, for every bird, everything like that. That's why God put us on this earth, and that's the only reason God lets us stay alive, is to the degree that we're helping others. Now, many of these, wealthy people, they do want to help others. But the reason why they feel bad about paying taxes is they know that the majority of their taxes has gone towards imprisoning people, wrongful arrest. I believe that a majority of Americans break these laws, these unconstitutional victimless and consensual crimes laws. By that I mean drug possession, gambling, prostitution, sex work. Gay sex was on my list, but then the Supreme Court went and legalized that in the case Lawrence v. Texas many years ago. Oh, by the way, I loved Scalia's dissent in that case where he said, where Scalia said, well, if you go and legalize gay sex, and the next thing you know, you have to legalize drugs, prostitution, I think he said bestiality, which how his mind works, I don't know. Although, look, I know an animal can't consent, but okay, we'll get into that later. But my point is you have a majority of Americans that break these laws every day or almost every day. Now yes, we have a horrible problem with people getting addicted to drugs, but you hear about this heroin epidemic, and yes, we have an epidemic of people getting addicted. But you know what? Let's discuss that for a few minutes, then I'll let you go. I know that we're over the time limit of what they say is. I know I was shooting for 18 minutes is the TED Talk limit. I'm already at 27 minutes. I see here. Yikes. Anyway, just so much to cover. So much to cover. What can I say about addiction? Look, I think there's a few things to say. Number one is, keep in mind, even though we have health care, and by the way, I don't like Obamacare, I want to have single payer. That will cut out the middleman. I also believe that by ending drug prohibition and drug prescription, you will lower the prices of all these drugs, and people will be able to buy whatever drugs they want, and the cost will be greatly lowered. If somebody, God forbid, has a life-threatening disease like AIDS, instead of having to wait for the FDA approval, they could just buy whatever they wanted. Now, as far as the government paying, yes, the government should only pay for certain drugs if there's FDA approval, yes. And I still want to have an FDA so that people have the option to buy an FDA-approved drug or not. Now, also, you'd want people to be allowed to, grow their own drugs in their backyard, in their closet. Now, just so you know, in those states where marijuana has been approved for medical purposes, and no, I don't support that crap. I just want to legalize everything, but as our founders wanted, and as drugs were legal for thousands of years in this whole world. But in those states where marijuana has been legalized for medical purposes, prescription drug use and abuse has gone down dramatically. That's all I can say. Now, as far as this whole PTSD thing and suicides, well, a lot of those people have been prescribed psychotropic drugs, prescription drugs. A lot of these mass murders done by these kids with these guns, these people are on these psychotropic drugs. Oh, which brings me to my major point. You, for many years, have had a population without health care. Even currently, with Obamacare, we have 20 million people without health care. Simultaneously, you have approximately 100 million people. Let me repeat, 100 million people in a nation with 320 million people. 100 million, so approximately 30% of the population is suffering from moderate to severe pain constantly. Moderate to severe pain constantly. I don't know if you know what that's like, but it's horrible. I've had a problem with my tooth lately. Thank God it's healing now, but now on top of that, you have about 10% of the population, it's estimated, with depression. Now, some crossover, I'm sure, with the pain, but you have 10% of the population suffering from extreme depression. Now, what percentage of them are treated? About 25%. Now, you also have approximately, I think it's 60 million people taking psychotropic psychiatric drugs every year. And you have 100 million people with this severe pain. Now, how many of that 100 million are taking opiates? I'm not sure. Maybe 50 million. Synthetic opiates mostly, even though it's the natural ones that are better. Oh, have you noticed that? They banned the natural drugs and then make it so that only the synthetic ones can be sold so that the drug companies can make billions, trillions of dollars. Well, under my plan, you know who'd be making the billions and the trillions? Or just not making any money but consuming it themselves? You and me. The average American who, say, wants to grow some weed in their closet or in their garden, or wants to turn the yard into poppy seeds and brew some, opium tea to take away their pain every day, or grow some coca leaves to pick up their energy every day. I mean, these are the three major drugs. Well, then you have some hallucinogens, but the three major drugs that have been used by all of mankind for thousands of years are cocaine, opium, and marijuana. And what does our government do in some kind of mass social experiment? Decides to ban them and lock us up for it? Are they nuts? I mean, first of all, people are treating pain and treating chronic problems. Second of all, people do just want to have a good time. Oh, and then they go and legalize the three things they legalize cause all they're doing is shifting us from being in drugs that were illegal, which is the natural ones, into the ones that are legal, which is mostly the unnatural ones, although the natural ones they've legalized are extremely deadly. Cigarettes smoking causes 500,000 deaths a year. Use of alcohol causes about 90,000 deaths a year. Oh, and then, of course, 10,000 more killed by DUIs. Oh, that's driving under the influence of alcohol. Now, that brings me to my final point. Many more points I want to make, but I realize you might have turned off the tape by now. Hope not. Listen, how can we okay, let me get to my final point. Then we'll discuss how we can win this with only 60 days to go. And I know there's only 60 days to go. Now, but let's be clear. There is this issue of driving while intoxicated. I myself, first of all, it's estimated that 20% of the population drives with some alcohol in them every year. Now, our nation has about 1 million arrests for driving under the influence of alcohol a year. But, how many times people, it's estimated, drive with alcohol in them a year? I believe the number I saw was, I think it was 113 million, 110 million times a year people drink with alcohol in them and drive, and we only catch 1 million. So we're catching under 1% of the time that people drink and drive. Similarly, we're interdicting under 1% of the illegal drugs in our nation a year, which is another problem. This whole war on drugs hasn't managed to keep any people away from them, and actually making certain things illegal. Any psychologist would tell you the best way to get somebody to want to do something is to tell them they can't, which is even these stupid alcohol laws, telling people that you can't do it until a certain age. And what happens? They turn 21. These idiots do 21 shots because they're so happy to be becoming 21, and then they die. I mean, alcohol is the most deadly drug out there. Well, actually, there's one drug more deadly than alcohol. You know what it is? The major killer. It's the cause of about 60% of the deaths in the U.S. and worldwide per year. Sugar. Sugar is the number one recreational and deadly drug in the world and nation. So, of course, it's legal. Look, I'm not proposing we make it illegal, although I would like a double or triple tax on sugar just to help to discourage its use and to pay for its medical costs. But in general with drugs, I believe that by keeping the costs down, that's the best way. I don't even want to tax it. You know why? Because taxing it creates a black market and all this violence. Second of all, taxing it, wait, what was it? Taxing it creates all this violence and the black market. So you just don't want to tax it because it creates all the violence. I mean, our main goal has to be to stop all these murders on the streets every year. Now, back to the DUIs. So how do you prevent people from, first of all, we're arresting maybe 15 million people a year. Most of them for, as I said, victimless crimes. We're giving 70 million people wrongful criminal records, making so they can never work again. You have about 95 million people in this country who are not working and are not even looking for a job. Yes, many of them are caring for elderly parents, like I'm helping to care for my mom right now who's quite ill. I've had to bring her back from the near death many times from diabetes, bringing me back to the whole sugar thing. But yes, I do get to do some law, thank God, and do some of my art and run for president. And that's been the focus of my life the last many years. But back to the whole DUI thing. Yes, I've been arrested twice 15 years ago for this bullshit. And I was tortured while being arrested. With the handcuffs, they put them on so tight that I was screaming for an hour. And they kept on screaming, shut up, shut up, shut up. And then didn't feel my thumbs for about 6 months. But was I intoxicated? No. No. I have a very, like many Americans, I have a strong constitution and tolerance and, was not impaired at all. Now, that's the problem. We're arresting 1 million people a year for this, but how many of them are actually truly a danger? Who knows? Maybe 100,000. Still a large number, but the way to stop all... And then, of course, these, DUI laws usually don't end up... catching these people who are dangerous with prescription drugs in them. Or, natural drugs that shouldn't be driving. Although that isn't all of them. For instance, if you've seen Dr. Sanjay Gupta's special on weed, most people who smoke marijuana can drive. But there is a simple way that I thought of. Instead of arresting, 1 million people to prevent 10,000 deaths a year, which is a big number, but you're wrongfully arresting and enslaving, say, 900,000 people who aren't a danger to themselves or anyone else. That's the problem. And even if I'm wrong, the state of California, when they send you your license, they admit that 5%, that I think they said 2, 3, 5% of the people that they arrest are right on that little, chart saying don't drink and drive. They admit that a few percentage of the people who they're arresting are no danger. I certainly know I was no danger. Yet they still found it, wanted to lock me up for a few weeks. And that's what I want to prevent. I want to prevent people from being wrongfully arrested who are no danger. But I also want to prevent all these deaths. Now, how do you do that? Well, that's quite simple if you think about it. Install a breathalyzer into every car. That's fine. It's actually necessary. Now you can say, oh, well, that won't catch the people who do drugs. Actually, they've just invented in Sweden, I believe, or Denmark, I think it's Sweden, a breathalyzer that will, I think it's Sweden, that can detect any drug. Now, how much would it cost? Maybe it costs $100 or $200 per car. Now, who's going to pay for all this? Well, as I said, we need to have tax the wealthiest people. First of all, Trump is nowhere near as wealthy as he says he is, number one. Number two, he's gone bankrupt numerous times. Number three, he inherited hundreds of millions of dollars. I've seen studies by professors that if you had just put that money in the market or put it into your average real estate investment, he would have done far better than he has done, even going with the best of his lies estimates. He has spent Donald, spending your whole life bribing politicians does not make you fit to be the president. It makes you fit for jail. Not fit for the president, fit for jail. Speaking about being fit for jail, Donald, when you're screaming about, in your announcement about Mexicans being rapists and murderers, and then you go and scream about we have to ban all Muslims when only a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage are responsible, and when the best way to get them to hate us is to bomb them, which is what you want to do, and Hillary does too, by the way. Bomb, bomb, bomb. She just says no ground troops. He says, sure, ground troops. This is all going to be like Vietnam again. But let's not forget, Donald Trump is screaming about rape, rapists, rape. Well, besides just bribing politicians to try to get them to stop investigating his crimes of fraudulently ripping people off and not giving them any kind of education about investing at all, besides literally bribing politicians for that, and bribing politicians to try to throw old ladies out of their homes, to seize their homes, to turn them into a parking lot for his limos in New Jersey, which he did if you research it, besides all of using eminent domain. By the way, I would be a billionaire today if it wasn't for eminent domain being used by New York State to take my grandfather's. He owned a building. He was a lawyer. He had grown up poor as an immigrant, rose up to be a lawyer, a judge. He had bought a business building in New York that was seized by the state. They gave him some money. And what did they do with it? They put up the World Trade Center. So I would be a billionaire right now if it wasn't for eminent domain. I would have had a much better chance of running. Donald goes screaming about how the system is stacked against him. Yeah, well, the only reason he got famous was for being rich. The only reason he was rich, and he's not even necessarily that rich, he was living on debt, was because his father, decided to build homes in swampland. By the way, let's get to that for a minute. Yes, there's global warming. The Earth is the temperatures are going up astronomically. Look, the Earth has been around 4.5 billion years. Humans have been around a few million years, but human civilization a few thousand years. And now in the course of a few hundred years, we're, about to destroy it. I mean, the population of the Earth has been shooting up, 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 and up. Here, the U.S. population has gone from, in 1940, around 125 million to today, 320 million. Here is the chart. But that is nothing compared to the world population, which in 1800 was 1 billion and today is over 7 billion. Here's the chart. Now, another chart. Oh, here's the global warming chart. Average global temperature. It started to shoot up around 1980 and it hasn't stopped. Now, what's important to know about that is also you have 40% of the people who, of 40% of the population of our nation, I haven't researched it, but probably the world, living near the shore. So as you have these, and many of the world's climatologists now estimate in the next few decades, we're going to have the sea level going up, not just centimeters or inches, but feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 feet. This could lead to, mass migrations, mass death, mass war. Now, on top of that, let's not forget, we have a population now in the world of 7 billion people. Now, how many of them are poor? You have about 800 million starving, and probably another billion near death. In our nation alone, you have about 50 million starving. So, and millions homeless, at least 2 million homeless. So, yeah, as I was trying to say, the only reason God puts us on this earth is to help people. Now, this amount of inequality of wealth in our nation and world, where you have, as I said, 1% of the nation owning 45% of the property, top 10% owning 70% of the property. So in other words, 90% of the population divides up the bottom 30%. And actually you have the 400 wealthiest people being worth the same as the poorest 150 million combined, which is a total of $6 trillion. Anyway, my point is this mass inequality is unjust. It's wrong. It's not why God put us here. And on top of that, it also does even hinder growth, meaning that the best way global growth has stagnated. By giving rich people tax breaks, all they're going to do is put that money in the bank. It's not going to do any good. If you distribute that money to the people, then they spend it. And then that gets the economy rocketing. So my tax plan is you tax the wealthiest people. Then you create 50 million jobs, spending $4 trillion on the infrastructure. Yes. Oh, by the way, yes, this has been part of my platform for 15 years that Donald Trump copied. But yes, I want to build walls on both borders, north and south, but not to keep out, waves of immigrants. Actually, if America wants to survive economically, we're going to have to continue to let in, millions and millions of immigrants. We should actually boost our numbers way higher. But of course, we have to screen them. That's where the wall comes in. You can't screen people unless you have walls. That's why I want to build walls, is so we can screen people coming in. Now, it's also simply a good jobs program. And, Trump is an idiot for saying we should have Mexico pay for the wall. No, that's not how you create jobs. We should pay for it and have our people working on the wall so we create jobs with our nation. Now, also, I want to have free Wi-Fi for everyone. Also, I want to have this whole thing where we got to get off of fossil fuels to prevent this. Try to reverse this temperature shooting through the roof, to try to prevent this massive, flooding. We have to create, green jobs. Now, that means creating renewable energy sources. Now, you could say, oh my God, well, that's going to be expensive. And if you do that, then America will be the high price producer. And how can we do that? And blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, here, I forgot to show you this chart. This shows that in 1945, you had 42 workers per Social Security towards Social Security retirement benefits. And then in 1950, you had 16.5 workers per beneficiary. And today, you know what it is? 3. And it's going down towards 2 soon. So unless we both let in tons more immigrants and allow people to start working again. Now that comes back down to my whole thing of ending these victimless crimes and pardoning all these people in jail for them. Now, because there's a huge article in the New York Times the other day about how employers are looking, they have openings, but they can't find people who either don't have a criminal record or who will pass a drug test. Now, I understand that, if somebody's operating heavy machinery, you don't want them on, say, opium, where they could fall asleep. But besides that, though, the difference between me and the other candidates is they all believe that these laws are constitutional. So they would have to go through the legislatures to change them. Now, while I really do want to go through the legislatures, and I know that if we could get all the people voting and if we could, re-allow people to vote who should have the right to vote, and also I want to emancipate teens. So I want to allow teenagers to vote. Yes, they could continue living with their parents if they want and if their parents want. But I want to emancipate them. I want to give them their human rights. Throughout all of human history, teens have had the right to marry, the right to work. I want to keep them in school. I want to have free college for everyone. I want to have free law school. I want to have free grad school, public and private. I want to have free housing for those who don't have any housing. I want to have free food for those who don't have any food. I want to have a free guaranteed minimal income for those who don't have an income. And, let me be honest, we're going to have what Rabbi Michael Lerner called a global Marshall Plan for the world. Basically, the Marshall Plan was used after World War II to build up the nations we had conquered. But in this case, it's about doing economic development worldwide. Basically, the concept is, and I deeply believe this, and I don't think there's any way to refute this, that the only way that we are going to prosper is if the world is prospering. The only way the world is going to prosper is if we are prospering. That is why God put us on this earth, is to be able to help each other. And if we don't free these people from our jails, and if we don't stop attacking other nations, God will punish us more. And if we do start being better people, God will be more loving towards us. Now, yes, I know this sounds all religious. And yes, besides being a lawyer, I forgot. But one thing I did was many years ago, I made a lot of money briefly, thank God. And I, besides winning this tax case and telling the world about it, which I spent years ago just surviving, but I did donate a lot of money before I, was lost a lot by being hurt by the government destroying the market. The Fed decided to just destroy the market several years ago for no damn good reason. Well, to steal the intellectual property of the .com companies, but that's a whole nother story. But I did donate some money to start a rabbinical school. That's, besides winning that tax case, that's my main accomplishment in life. And it's called the Academy for Jewish Religion of California. And Rabbi Stan Levy came to me. I love him, and he came to me with this wonderful idea. He's a rabbi I love and prayed with many times, and I love him. And he came with this idea of starting this rabbinical school, and I said, sounds great. And he's like, well, if you donate the money and I do the work, I think we can do this, although I gave him some great advice all along. And we have this amazing rabbinical school going. But I'm serious about this. It's that, the economists agree with me. Let me think how I can say this. Thomas Piketty said, he in his recent book, about wealth, it turns out I've been proposing a wealth tax for about 15 years. He, about 2 years ago, came out with this book, which is the biggest bestseller of, economic bestseller, discussing how he really wants to, sorry, I need some tea. Oh, well, anyway, how he believes in this wealth tax, a graduated wealth tax of the wealthiest people. And, it's a way to spur growth, but it's also the right thing to do. Now, who else proposed this, by the way? Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine proposed that we have jobs for everyone and a wealth tax on the wealthiest people. I topped my wealth tax out at 8%. You know what his proposed tax was? 10 to 20%, he said. 10 to 20% of the landowners. Now, of course, his tax was going to be voluntary, but still 10 to 20% tax. Of course, in our modern world, I do want to have a voluntary tax where we would give people, a lot of credit for what they do. But in our modern world, most people wouldn't want to pay a voluntary tax. However, that's, as I was trying to say before, mostly because in the past, our taxes have gone towards either jailing and killing our own people or or killing people from overseas. Now, of course, I don't believe in torture. I certainly don't believe in, this whole Guantanamo Bay thing. If you want to charge people, you charge them. Just like, I forgot to tell you, if you want to tap people, you need a warrant. It's called enforcing the Constitution. Now, you all hear about the NSA tapping program. Yeah, that's nothing compared to the DEA program, which has gone on. It's called the Hemisphere Project. It's gone on for 29 years now. They're using AT&T routers and their wires to go back, and they saved our records for 29 years, so they can go, and they're collecting 4 billion phone call records a day, where they can not only they can tell who you're on the phone with, how long you're on the phone with them, and your location, and they don't use a warrant. Now, so the only way to stop this mass spying on us, let's just get to the point here. When you combine mass surveillance along where they're spying on everyone at all times, and listening probably, and they just haven't told us. We'll find that out in 20 years. I mean, the Hemisphere tapping was going on for 27 years, and we find out 3 years ago. I bet they're listening in on everything, and we'll just find that out in 20 years, Really. But this whole, when you have crimes on the books that criminalize a majority of people, and you do in this nation. We probably have 10% of the nation using illicit drugs, and you probably have, the number that doing prostitution and gambling. And by the way, the government oh, the government, they want to make all of this, they want, gambling is fine as long as they're the ones profiting. Drug use is fine as long as they're the ones profiting. Prostitution, well, you're allowed to work as long as you're doing the jobs they want. But even, profiting off of sex, you're allowed to do it off of TV. Oh, and let's talk about TV for a minute. This is just like taxing people is a political decision, and allowing 1% of the population to own 45% of our nation's and world's wealth is a political decision. It's also a political decision to make it so that TVs only carry for-profit programming. I mean, I believe, and what is this whole, if we want to have fair elections, if you want to have the right people winning, I mean, what is this bullshit where some reality TV show gets to pick some stupid bigot named Trump, who has not worked a day in his life compared to all these Mexicans and Latinos and Muslims he wants to throw out. I mean, and women he insults, and disabled people he insults. Oh, and he says that he will negotiate good deals. First of all, bullshit. And every time he's negotiated in the past, it's mostly been because he had so much debt, he was too big to fail. So he negotiated to continue to keep his helicopter and his apartment building so that he could hopefully, pay back the debt that he was owed. But second of all, oh, I forgot to get to the final point. We'll get to all the rest, but okay. I'll talk about his economic policy for a minute or two. He says that he'll negotiate better trade deals. First of all, free trade has largely helped our nation a lot. Yes, I've been upset about this TPP. I've been trying to block it, but let me just show you this chart here. This chart here shows U.S. productivity versus number of manufacturing jobs. So that's from 1950 to 2010. So yes, the number of manufacturing jobs has tanked, but the output per worker has been going through the roof. You see, that's the problem. Well, it's a blessing and a problem, but productivity per worker is going through the roof, largely due to computers and robots, that kind of thing. Sorry, I'm going through my charts here. So what's happening is there's no way around that. In other words, we have to accommodate for the possibility of a future where, where we don't have enough jobs for everyone in our nation or world. That's just a fact. And, the world has more than enough money and food for everyone, even though we have 7 billion people, and we're expected to go up, to 10, 15, maybe 20 billion people over the next several years. We need to make sure that nobody is in our, we live in the wealthiest nation in the world, but we live in a very wealthy world. We need to make sure that not one person is starving. We have 22,000 children die a day starving to death. That is a crime. That is a fucking crime. We need to make sure that not one person dies from starvation in our nation or world. We need to make sure that not one person dies due to crime. Poverty also causes crime. Now, under my plan, which is called taxing Trump, you have enough, and it's not out of anger. It's that's where the money is. Hillary says that she has a fair tax. Bullshit. She will be increasing the tax on the wealthiest people by a few $1 billion. She says that she wants to create, I think she said a few million jobs, 10 million jobs. I want to create 50 million jobs. She says that her plan will create that she can spend $250 billion on the infrastructure. Well, it's going to cost $4 trillion. I want to have free Wi-Fi for everyone too. Okay, look, this tape is ending. Let me just show you. We've had many deaths, and yes, many of them are at the hands of police, and many of them, yes, black people are disproportionately arrested and killed by police, but overall, you still have 60% of the people in jail are not black. So it's about race, but it's also just about morals. Our government is trying to institute morals which are based on religion, and they have no right to do this. We have a right As Thomas Jefferson said, the legitimate powers of government extend only to such acts as are injurious to others. If I'm not hurting someone, I have the right to be free. We have the right to be free. I love you all. Please vote. Write in Fred Schultz for president. Please write in Fred Schultz for president. Tell the pollsters. I love you. Tell the pollsters. Thank you. Love